we were talking about, misconceptions about Christianity and how a lot of people think Christianity is about, being good, that it's based upon you being a good moral person. And somebody says it's not. Well, what is it then?
Hey guys, it's Justen with Against the Tide Media, and I'm just going to keep this really short and introduce you, the one, the only Thor Ramsey. And Thor, I honestly am just getting to know you now, and I honestly have been a fan of yours for a while because Christopher Sean Shaw and I go back a little ways.
Okay.
And so I have seen some of the shorts that you guys have done in the past.
Right.
And I always like those. So take us from the beginning. Tell us about you, first of all, and then how these shorts working with Christopher Sean Shaw all of a sudden isn't the right phrase, eventually led to this great new movie.
It's a long time, and then all of a sudden, it happens for a long time, and then it happens quickly. So that's pretty accurate. So my real brief bio. I started stand-up in 1987. Probably before you were born, maybe.
No.
I started stand-up in clubs in 1987 as a young man, and I was a club comic for years. It's a long story, but I was a backslidden Christian because my theology was so bad, I didn't think I was a Christian anymore. It was one of those things. I had a theology where you could lose your salvation. So anyway, came back to Christ with my wife. Yeah, we were living in Chicago, and then started in the Christian market, hosted a comedy series called Bananas for a few years, was in the Thou Shalt Laugh comedy series, or their comedy DVD series, and then and some other things. But I'd written several just mainstream comedies, and I was working on a faith-based comedy called Youth Group. I had about 30 pages of it, basing it upon so in what years, what was this? Probably about, I wish Christopher was here. He's better with the years than I am, but probably a decade ago. So 2010, 2008, between 2008 and 2010, Jon Favreau, who is, people might be familiar with him. He's the creator and, writer and director, or a writer of many and director of many, the Mandalorian. And John's also a character actor. They might know him, and he directed a couple of the Marvel Iron Man movies, but he plays Happy in that universe. And I think this was his directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken, but he wrote and directed a independent feature. And I was monitoring independent features at that time because, I wanted to make this movie. I just wanted to make it for as cheaply as possible. I just wanted to get it made and apply it to the Christian subculture because, I was very familiar with the Christians. Well, my life was in the Christian subculture. I was doing big youth conferences and, I worked with Chuck Colson's Prison Fellowship doing prisons. I did youth conferences. I did, it's like churches, published a couple books in the Christian publishing, market. So I was very familiar with that world. So I was trying to write a loving satire of that, a slice of life. So I was writing about a youth pastor in crisis. So there's a guy over at Sony Faith. He's still there. I don't think it's called Sony Faith anymore. Sony Affirm. Mm-hmm. And his name's, you might know him, Josh Nadler. But Josh is a great guy. And, this is back when I had a career I cared about, but I had a manager who got me a meeting with Sony Affirm, and Josh was in that meeting, and they were asking me to, I was pitching them ideas for a movie, and I had these other completely finished screenplays, but they were just general market screenplays. But and I still think that way. They were high concept, big idea. So I went in there with a 2-minute pitch. I practiced on Friends the night before, took them out to dinner. I'm practicing my 2-minute pitches on you. So I went in there and practiced my 2-minute pitch. And then I went into the meeting and gave them my two, different 2-minute pitches. And they're like, we're looking for it's Sony Affirm. We want a faith-based movie. Did you not prepare for this meeting at all? And so I'm like, I only had 30 pages of Youth Group at the time. So I told him I've got this script about a youth pastor in crisis, and I didn't tell them it wasn't finished, but they go, we want to see that. And I go, all right, give me a week. And so I went and finished the script, sent it to him. And then Josh called me up and he gave me notes. And then I did a rewrite, and he called me, and he did this 5 times. I'd do a rewrite and he'd call me up and give me notes on it. And the very last time he goes, what your story needs right now to bring all the characters together is a big idea. You need a big idea. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, it's kind of like the big idea is like, it when you hear it type of thing. So I had my, antennas up for a big idea. So I've been involved in church planning since 13 or 14 years ago. I moved to Redlands, California with a friend who planted a church as kind of his, passenger seat guy, so to speak. So it's really odd in church planning. You can sit in the passenger seat and the guy driving can get in a crash and roll the car, and you're fine. You're fine as long as you're in the passenger seat. So I was just kind of along for the ride and watching him crash and burn. And, it was just like, but that church, the report now, that church is thriving now. They're doing great, but had moved to Redlands to help. And I was still doing stand-up full time. So for the first year, we just met in our home in the evening. So I was there, but a long story short, my church planning friend called me up and said, you're not going to believe what, this church is doing, like for Good Friday. I'm like, what are they doing? He goes, they're actually crucifying a human being on Good Friday. I'm like, there's no way. And he's like, yeah, this is me, this is him. Just so you know, get online, look it up. Now, what they were doing was a passion play, but their advertising made it, it was going to be so graphic and so realistic that it sounded, that the marketing made it seem like they were actually going to crucify a human. So they weren't. But I realized that just then that so many pastors, however well-intentioned they were in America, had done such crazy things to attract people to church that for a second, my friend and I actually believed that an American evangelical church would actually crucify someone on Good Friday to attract people. And right then I knew there's the big idea, because the thing about satire is, well, it's crazy now. We're living in satirical times, and that's the problem right now, is that you can't write satire if people are living it because they don't recognize it. But for the church, I think it was still an outlandish enough idea that they could recognize the satirical content of it. And so that became the big idea of youth group, which then eventually became church people. Now, Christopher and I had worked on several short films together. He knew about this idea from when we did Skip Listening together. So I called up Christopher and says, let's just get all that, because in these short films, and I'll say this for the sake of your listeners who may not know, but there's a bunch of short film contests out there. Now, the one we participated in was called the 168 Film Festival. And it's basically you have a week to write, produce, film, edit a short film. So you got like a week. So that's why it's called the 168 Film Festival. And everyone volunteers their time. And generally there's, somebody's footing the bill somewhere, but it's not the same, cost that it would cost you to make a feature. But we had a crew and a red camera. We had the same kind of crew that you'd have for a feature film, but it was only a 3-day shoot. So we were getting all this experience in filmmaking. We were working with professionals, and Joth Riggs, who you may know. Joth was our first AD on Skip Listening, and Joth is a consummate professional and an amazing guy. So we took a day, we shot what Christopher term it, but it was like a proof of concept trailer, because it's easier to pitch something if you can show someone this is the feel of the movie, this is the tone of the movie. And so I think you can still see the trailer online on Christopher's YouTube page, if I'm not mistaken. So we shot that trailer. Matthew Reithmeyer edited it for us. And Matthew, I think, has his own film coming out called Paul's Promise, if I'm not mistaken. But he has a cameo in Church People, and he ad-libbed the line. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie, where I'm signing, beach balls. My character's signing beach balls, and my character's struggling with what a circus all these conferences are becoming about the gospel. And so he's like almost chastising the guy about, let's talk about what Jesus did. And, but anyway, Matthew, I'm not going to give it the line, but Matthew has a line in that segment that in Church People, that's one of my favorite lines in the movie. But he edited the trailer for us, and then Christopher just started blasting it everywhere online, everywhere you could go. To the point that was embarrassing. I was like, just tone it down a little bit, Christopher. I'm being embarrassed. But thank God he did that, because Stephen Baldwin saw it. And then he contacted us, and we had a phone meeting with him, which led to a live meeting with him that was about 3 hours long. And then he actually said during that meeting, I'm going to find funding for this film. And then it took him 2.5 years later, but he just slowly kept at it. And 2.5 years later, he had funding, and the film came together, and we shot it. It took us a while to get a distribution deal, but we shot it independently. And I guess that's kind of the standard practice for independent features generally. But now it's, and I couldn't be more pleased with the reaction it's getting. And it's today's Good Friday. So when this will air, but we're filming it on Good Friday, and it's the death of Christ, good and joyful for the Christian, because he died, in our place. So we're celebrating that. So the film has that sense of joy and comedy, but it really deals with Good Friday. So I think people will be, I don't want to guarantee, but I would venture to say, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised if they watch it on Good Friday by how it affects them emotionally and how they think about the crucifixion.
Well, and when you mention the crucifixion again, I mean, and you talk about the satire of it, like that was the piece of the movie that I thought, oh wow, they really went for a heck of a metaphor here. This is the metaphor of a church that's going to go just too far. But to hear that it was based on reality, I mean, that blew my mind. I didn't know that. Christopher had never told that to me.
Well, it's also based on my experience as a church planter. And someone who loves the church, and it's like I tell this to people all the time. It's like, you can only satirize something you love, because when you see people satirize something they don't love, it comes across as mean. And we love Jesus and we love the church, so the film doesn't come across as mean by any stretch of the imagination. I will say that.
No, not at all. And even some of the tropes of being in a church. I mean, Stephen's character, of course, as the greeter, is just so spot on at times. I mean, it's like there, but just one level higher. How much of that was what you had written, and how much of that was what Stephen had brought?
Well, I'd written a character just for Stephen that was a greeter. But when I originally wrote it, it was just a comic relief character. But Stephen's he's a serious actor, so he's not just going to come in as comic relief. So we ended up working on his character more, but it was through his input, that he wanted that character. And that character is really it ended up being a pivotal character. It's not just a bit part. My MO in script writing is I never begin with what I want to say. I always begin with what's an idea or story that excites me. Because again, your film and novels or whatever, different type of medium you happen to be working in, they're about story. So you have to find the story that excites you, and then see what theme develops from the story. Because if you're a Christian, you're going to have a Christian worldview, I would hope, and write from that worldview. So my whole thing is, if we always begin with what do we want to say, then I think that's when films or books or things come across as, kind of a sermon put to film. And we definitely didn't want to do that. We wanted it to be a comedy, and that's a story in itself, the battle to keep it a comedy. But so we just began with the idea, with the story. And since the story took place in the Christian subculture, we didn't have to force the message in, because it was dealing with how the church deals with the gospel. So the subject matter was already there. We didn't have to force the message in. I think that's why the message is there. I think it's strong, but I don't think it feels forced. And like with what you're working on, The Chosen, so the subject matter is just there. You don't have to, you don't have to force it in. It's already there. And I think that's the best way to, and that's just for future Christian filmmakers, because Christian film is a genre. I will say, and I'm not ashamed of the genre anymore. I mean, for a while I struggled with it, but the way that the culture has radically changed in the last 5 years, I'm a defender now of the Christian subculture, because that's the whole point of having a subculture. It's it is in addition to the general culture. The general culture, it's like everyone can enjoy their films for the most part. And then they have a lot of message films that, because people, I think, so here's my thing. People can criticize the Christian genre of films and say, you guys make a lot of bad films. I go, yeah, we do. But you know what? You guys make more in the secular market. You guys make more bad films than we do. You really do, because there's more of you. Now, do you make more good films? Yes, but there's more of you. You have a bigger talent pool. We have a smaller talent pool. And if you look at the films we've been making over the last decade, they're getting better and better. So that's my argument, but it's needed. The Christian subculture is needed because that voice is needed in the culture. We're in the world, but not of the world, therefore subculture. So I'm a defender now of the Christian subculture. I think it's very needed. So that's the one thing I was saying. But
and you hit the nail on the head too. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's a numbers game. I mean, the percentage of high quality to lesser quality faith-based films is probably pretty similar to the ratio of high quality Hollywood movies to low quality. And I would venture to actually go out and say there's more low quality secular films out there, percentage wise.
Yes, there absolutely are. Yeah. So, and we're dealing with that. We're not dealing with the same kind of funds as Hollywood, because I find it a funny question. Sometimes people go, how'd you get all these different, because we have Stephen Baldwin, William Baldwin, his wife, China Phillips, who was from the group Wilson Phillips years ago, who I was a big fan of. I actually had their album. So it was fun on the set meeting some of these people. Donald Faison used to be in Scrubs, for its entire run. And Joy Fatone used to be in NSYNC. The point is this, the question I get from people all the time, because there's so many, well-known people in the movie, not including, not me, but the other actors are well-known. But people will say, how did you get these people involved? William Baldwin, Stephen Baldwin, China Phillips, Joy Fatone, Donald Faison, how'd you get all these people involved in the movie? It's like, well, once a movie's funded and you have money, you can get anyone interested in your movie. That's just the bottom line reality. It's like, so if we had bigger budgets as Christian films, I think, we could, but we're really working. Now, we had a just under a $2 million budget for church people, which in the Christian market is a pretty well financed movie, at least from my understanding. So, but in the secular market, that doesn't even hit their threshold of an independent feature, which is about 5 million. So like we're even below what their independent feature budgets are. But again, I feel like the film is satirical. It deals with an important issue. And I really feel like the people at Collide Media who really did the marketing and put together the trailer, they just did this amazing job because they really nailed it in the trailer, which, is the gospel enough? And because it's an important theme in the Christian subculture. So the point is this, as a church planter, I'm getting emails all the time from influencers. Influencers, is that the word you use now?
Influencers, yes, influencers.
Yes, influencers. So I get emails from them, and they're really well-meaning. I will say that it's not about motives; it's about methodology. Because even in the church growth movement, which I think their motives are great, I just think their methodology is off. Because I'm dealing with two things in my own personal life because I'm still a church planter. But
all right, guys. So we were having a little bit of technical issues with Thor's backyard. Apparently, Thor lives like on Mars or something, and just has no cell signal back there. So now he's inside, different scenery, same interview, still going on. Talking about the brilliantly funny, talented, and godly Thor Ramsey. So Thor, you were talking about your problems as a church planter.
Yeah, so this really dealt into the theme of the movie, which is because I get, again, emails all the time from influencers, people from church people who are trying to help pastors and church leaders, have an impact on culture and the world. And it's all very, very, I don't doubt their motives, but I do end up questioning their methodology because I always get things about communication. How are we going to reach Generation Z? How are we going to reach the millennials? And we need to change our communication style. We need to make sure we're speaking that mindset about speaking their language and all that. And what's really interesting to me is if you go back to someone like Martin Lloyd-Jones, who's one of my favorite preachers, and if people aren't familiar with him, he was probably the greatest preacher of this past century. There's actually a documentary on him called Logic on Fire. That's the name of the documentary, Logic on Fire. It's a great documentary about him, but I think he died about the late 70s. But his heyday of preaching was the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So you can go back and listen to these sermons, even some sermons that were, right before World War II and sermons in the 1950s. But what's interesting, like he'll talk about the same thing. You have people in his time in the 1940s and 50s saying, we've got to change how we communicate and change and adapt. We don't want to change the message. We just want to adapt. But it's the whole idea that if you do adapt, a lot of times you are changing the message as you adapt. So his point is people have not changed. So Generation Z, they've got their own cultural markings as the millennials do, as Generation X does, as the baby boomers do, as the greatest generation does. But regardless of those cultural distinctions, they haven't changed as humanity has not changed. And humanity needs the same message of the gospel. It's a simple message. We don't need to dress it up. It's the whole thing about, just the church does not need to. It's the same. It goes back to music. There's never been a non-Christian in the world who's like, I'd go to church if their music was a little different. I really would. Because music is while I'm there. They don't care about our music. They really don't. And I remember Beckett Cook. You might know Beckett Cook, but Beckett is he's pretty well known now in the evangelical subculture. But I met Beckett during the filming of Church People. But Beckett's a great guy with a great testimony, and he talks about his testimony. But I remember Beckett, I don't know if he shares this in his testimony, but his first time and this is a great church. This is an amazingly large church they've got the funds to do the music and to do everything the way every church would like to do it. If we had the funds and the talent, which small churches, don't. But he's walking into, you can't get better music and better musicians. And his reaction is, that music. So it's like the things that we think are going to make us more attractive aren't the things. Like they're not the things. That God's method of reaching people hasn't changed. It's people being more like Christ, sharing the message of Christ. It's just that same type of thing. So we don't need we don't need smoke machines, whistles and bells. It's that whole argument, make the main thing the main thing. And the church doesn't need to be all these different things.
Right. Well, and we're kind of in a mode right now, and we probably have been, of overcompensating for things and trying to go the extreme route, thinking the only way we're going to reach people is if we, really surprise them. And that's what is happening in Church People. I mean, it is a legitimate problem of younger people are turning away from the church. But the way to bring them back isn't to do something completely radical and off the wall. And I love in the movie, I don't remember the specific line, but you brought it up just talking here about, shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't the gospel be enough? And it's in the trailer too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it really comes down to that. And I think that's what Church People does so wonderfully. And all at the same time while poking a little fun at ourselves, admitting that we have some quirks and some things that outsiders might look at as kind of nerdy or weird.
Well, and they are serious within the church. They are serious issues within the church itself. I can't remember the guy's name because I was unfamiliar with him, but he wrote an article in the Christian Post about a month ago about the leadership crisis in evangelicalism and why we keep seeing all these, moral failures of leaders. And his take was because we've adopted the corporate world's model of leadership, the CEO model. And he says, if you look at the corporate world, moral failure is rampant with these type A narcissistic leaders who are all about results. And so you take that model of leadership and you just adapt it to the church. We've left the biblical model, which is shepherding and servanthood, And my take right now, and this is really what I don't know if I'll write a screenplay dealing with this issue, but my big thing right now, and it's taken me years to get here, is that the church overall is dominated by church growth thinking. And we're dominated by the big churches. And, so every little church is trying to emulate the big church. But, and I don't know the exact stats, but I'm rounding up. Let's say there are 300,000 churches in this country, and there's approximately that many. Only 1,000 are mega churches. The average church is 50 people. So our thinking is all backwards. It's like, if you're a pastor, you have to be content with shepherding 50 people for the rest of your life. Can you be content with that? And that's not to say you won't see some conversions and stuff like that, and you're not trying to be influential. And I'm not against big churches if they stick to the gospel, but the big, gigantic churches are not the norm. 100 churches of 50 people can actually be more effective than one church of 1,000. Or 10 churches of 100 people can actually be more effective than one church of 1,000. They just really can, because you're back to more of a biblical basis, which is the shepherding of individual lives. There's an accountability built into it. We know your face, we see you. And some people, maybe, I know when I came back to Christ, I wanted anonymity. I didn't want anyone in my face. So I think there's a place for big churches. Again, I'm not against big churches. But I think in the church, I think our thinking is backwards. I think we should see that the small church is the norm. A church of 50 to 100, 200 people, whatever, that's the norm of the body of Christ, not the 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 mega churches. They are not the norm. And I think we just have our thinking backwards. And so I think this film at least plays a part in hopefully getting us to rethink how we're doing church. Now, maybe our next film, maybe we'll follow up and do another film about the thinking about what the church should look like, so I don't know.
One thing that I want people to understand too, now I've seen church people a couple of times, and from the trailer, I've seen people comment, oh, good, this is, calling out the mega church for all that dumb stuff and bad stuff. You're not, and you've said it here, you're not anti-mega church. Church people is not anti-mega church. You're just against this greed and this competition of my church is bigger than yours. I'm saving more people than you. Ha ha ha, right?
Or really doing ludicrous things for the right reasons. Because it's like, the Village Church, that's a gigantic church. But, I've always thought Matt Chandler, now I haven't listened to Matt lately, but, but I've always thought Matt was a, good Bible teacher. It's a solid Bible church. You got good fruit coming out of there. I think Jen Wilkin, I think she, if I'm not mistaken, I think she is, attends. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know that she's become very influential in terms of her writing. And, so I'm saying I'm not against mega churches, but I think that the thing I'm against now is because I think it's important to not almost get in the way of the gospel, because everything we did in the movie, churches have actually done that. It's like, so we didn't take anything that, like I know a church planter who did that. If we hit certain attendance records, I'll get the church tattoo.
Oh, really?
I'll get the church logo tattooed on my arm. It's like, I know a guy who did that. So, I'm going, and that became a thing. That's a thing. I know there's probably if we had people write, it's like, there's probably a ton of church planters who, I did that thing, and I think we're all familiar with the video, the youth guy who tried to bring a motorcycle in and it got out of control. And, but they're,
that was you, right? That video was you.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, that was exactly.
I assume
that became the inspiration for the movie. But what's kind of funny and sad at the same time is that I just saw a local church here advertised on Easter Sunday, BMX riders. So you're going. See, then we had that in the movie. So we have a church doing that this Sunday in our area, but it was actually motorcycles flipping over the pastor's head, which is what the original idea in the script was. But Stephen knew a BMX guy, so we got BMX guys. But all that to say, churches are doing these things still. And so that's really it's the gentle rebuke of that. Going, let's not make the gospel a circus, because it's not.
Well, it works well for Easter Sunday, though, if you've got a bunch of bikes, because then you can call it Reverrection Sunday. Come on. Huh?
See, there you go.
Dude, we're so on the same page when it comes to just, recognizing some of the things that are going on. And really, it just comes down to Jesus and the way that he communicated with people. When you really study the way he interacted, he wasn't seeking the big crowds. The big crowds were seeking him.
Yes.
And he spent more of his time on the individual basis or just small groups. I mean, he had 12 disciples, not 12,000 disciples. And there's a reason for that. So,
okay. Okay. Is the fridge open?
No.
Okay. I got to go check on something.
Yeah.
Can you give me a minute?
I can hang out. Yeah. If you want to come back.
Yep.
See, this is what we should leave in here, Noah, right? Stuff like this, because this is real life. This is the glitz and glam of the film world. With me, with my makeshift bed sheet backdrop that I used for a video, and a plant that tries to cover up the glass door when my kids walk by, and then interruptions like this. It's glitzy. It's glamorous. Use that if you want. Look at Thor has a lot of, here, let's go back to gallery view. Look at all the Easter baskets Thor has. I don't know when however this records, my finger might not be pointing at the Easter baskets. They might be though. I'm not sure. He's prepared. He's prepped. Oh, and let's get this in there too. Skull. Minnesota Vikings. That's my football team, Noah. Minnesota Vikings. They are the best mediocre team in the history of the NFL. They will never get to the level that I want them to be at. But that's just Minnesota sports, I tell you. I don't know. I'm 44 years old and I have never seen the Vikings in a Super Bowl. There's 30 teams in the NFL, maybe 32. Come on. The math shows that the Vikings should have been to the Super Bowl at least once in my life. Now, granted, they were there in 1977, but I was a baby. So.
Sorry, man.
No, that's all right. I filled the dead airspace with a little bit of, product placement for my Minnesota Vikings, which I was thrilled that I don't want to spoil who jumps up and says it, but there's a fun reference to the Vikings at the end, and I thought that was.
Are you from Minnesota originally?
I am. I'm still here, actually. We moved. We lived in LA for a bit, but came back for the weather.
Where are you at in Minnesota?
Twin Cities area.
Okay, that's where we used to vacation. Because I grew up in Nebraska, our vacations were the Great Lakes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd have to look up the cities, but I had an aunt by marriage who had a resort called Ruby's Resort. I went to take my family, but they sold the resort, and the entire area now is like new homes.
Really? Like in Minnesota?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And my dad had a cousin whose family had a cabin on the lake. But this was a cabin that people used to like. This cabin was from the 1800s. It was a legitimate this was their home, so, but that became a vacation cabin for us, but it was on some lake that had no fish. I will say that. we used to vacation up there. So, but yeah, Minnesota was our vacation.
Oh, well, come back up. I'll take you to our, now we have a cabin finally, but it's really, really tiny.
I think it was near Bemidji.
Okay. Yeah. We're between, I mean, it's not going to mean a whole lot, but we're halfway between Brainerd and Bemidji, about 2.5 hours north of the Twin Cities.
My good friend, I was just not Skyping, but Zooming this morning with Darren Streblo, who's in Cloquet.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. By Duluth. Yeah.
Cloquet, right by Duluth.
Yeah. There you go.
As the locals call it, Duluth. Got to go up north to Duluth. I have family that actually talks like that. Well, hang out as long as you want to. I want to be respectful of your time too. Yeah. But I feel like we should probably kind of put a button on some of the stuff that we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, dude, we're so on the same page about things. So let's just.
Now, what's your role in The Chosen?
Associate producer. Just
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I've been with it for 3 years now, and
Okay.
it's taking off. And
Yeah.
I mean, we have a recognizable IP that helps out a little bit. You know, most people are fairly familiar with the Bible and our source material. So,
but it's a great way to explore it in a new way, though.
It is. Well, and to your point earlier about the same issues back in the 40s and 50s, the pastor you had mentioned, I'm going to watch this tape back so I can write the name down.
Yeah, Martin Lloyd-Jones. Yeah,
Martin Lloyd-Jones. What we have today is not necessarily the exact same as then, other than we've got more methods to give the message.
Right.
But I think that the risk is that because we have these new methods, we think we need to embellish the message so much. And that's not it at all. And so like with The Chosen, not to, steer it back to that, but do we put a few things in between the miracles? Of course. I mean, we give Simon Peter, his wife, a name. There's no reference of his wife actually in the Bible, only his mother-in-law. So we can deduce from that, well, he must have been married.
Yeah.
So there are things that we put in between, but still the heart of the story is.
Yes. And then people have to realize it's about the Bible. It's not the Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole thing. It's like, hopefully it'll point people to the Bible, but the embellishments aren't theological points. Peter's wife's name is not going to make a difference in the content of the gospel itself, generally. So,
Yeah. And for what you're doing with the not only church people, but actually planting churches, I mean, you're looking for ways to reach people without going to the extreme measures that the senior pastor does in church people, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm a small church guy. In my journey, it's only been the last 3 months that I've come to terms with my idea of church, and it's been developing a lot. But I know that my idea of church itself was kind of faulty, just because churches don't give doctrine of the church. So I think these are the waters we swim in. We're all swimming in these same waters for the most part. I mean, we're all, there's like we mentioned certain names, we all know them. We go to conferences, and it's always about the big and the best-selling books. And so there is an aspect where marketing drives what's influencing the church. And I go, that's really not the way it should be, or we should tweak what we're marketing, So I think that's part of the issue. And I think the mentality catches on to the local church, which I think becomes detrimental because, again, most churches are small. And with COVID, man, as a church plant, this is like reboot. We were 5 years, we were 4 years and COVID hit. And so this last year's almost been like, this is like a reboot. But it's been encouraging again because we're meeting live. We've been meeting live for the last 3 months, so it's been encouraging again, but it is like, church plant 2.0, so.
So does that essentially delay when you're able to move on and plant the next one, or is that not even the goal necessarily?
Well, it is the goal, but I'm finding it's like, because that was our original goal, is to become a church that plants churches, but I'm finding you don't have a lot of control over that even. I mean, it's like there are so many things you just do not, because what I'm finding is, I think this is the mistake of the church growth movement, is they think these principles, and I'm not saying there aren't principles that can't apply everywhere, but for the most part, when a church explodes somewhere, the situation of that particular city, they're very unique. So you can't expect the next church to explode in the same way. And I think churches exploding is really the wrong analogy anyway, because generally it's slow and steady growth. And again, most churches never, a lot of churches don't break. And I think the church growth people are like, they're not breaking these barriers because their methodologies are wrong. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think, every church has a purpose that God calls them together for that particular area. And you can have a multitude of small churches that are very effective. So I think I keep thinking, I was like, maybe I'll write the book, The Effective Small Church, and the first step in becoming the effective small church is being content with being a small church. Otherwise you can't be effective, because then you're always looking over somebody's shoulder about what's down the pike and, who can help us get where we want to go. And that whole thing. Cause I'm going, that church life can be very simple or you can make it complex, but I think it's very simple for the most part. I do like that. Tom Rainer brings that in. I think he wrote a book with somebody called Simple Church, which I've always liked that concept. Like, keep it simple and don't over program. It's about the people. And again, I'm not against mega churches. What I'm against is that dominant thinking overriding the majority of churches, which are the norm.
And to become a quote unquote mega church, the tendency, I think, is to tailor the message to draw the most people, as opposed to, this is God's message. And I don't care if I'm preaching to 20 people or 20,000 people. This is the message that God wants me to preach, and I'm not going to get sucked into trying to make this church explode. I'm not going to worry about my followers on Instagram, our church's popularity on YouTube. I'm just going to work on the individuals that God has put in front of me and try to bless them.
Well, in one sense, I think smaller churches have a greater ability to preach an uncompromising message. But I would say the bigger you are, the more freedom you have to preach an uncompromising message, because if you lose 200 people, it's not going to, if you're 5,000 people, if you lose 200 people, it's not going to matter. So it's like, but I think that's when if you're always concerned about the numbers, you're already gigantic. So if you preach an uncompromising message now, it's not going to affect you at all. Whereas a small church actually has more to lose, because you lose 2 people and that's a big deal a lot of times. But I think that the advantage of the small church is, the flock. And the flock knows you, and so there's more of a trust as you're speaking to them. It's not impersonal. The messages are very personal. So
almost more accountability, though, on you as a pastor too, because everybody does know you.
Yeah,
it's like a small town thing.
It's vice versa, though. No, there's more accountability with me because they know me, but there's more accountability with them because now I know them. So. And I think that's that's a shepherding idea, which is, new to me as a pastor, to be honest, not one of my strengths. I'm not, so, but, moving into it, because that's the New Testament call.
Well, believe it or not, I have a story outline that I started a while ago, and I don't mind putting this out there publicly. If somebody wants to run with this, I by all means, go with it. It's called Mega Pastor. and I won't give much more. You and maybe you and I and Christopher can talk about it sometime offline. But a lot of what we're talking about is kind of what I'm trying to accomplish in that. And again, to your point earlier, it's not that I'm trying to be preachy about it. It's just, there is a message, there is an issue, and if we can make some fun and also have heart, which I think is what church people does so well. It's so fun, but there is so much heart. Like I laugh, a movie that can make me laugh and cry, like The Great Notting Hill with Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. You've done your job,
Yeah, and it's like, and that's the greatest compliment when people say I laughed, I cried. I mean, it sounds cliche, but you're going, that's what you want in a film. You want to laugh and cry. Though in hindsight now, my new rule is no crying in comedy. There's no crying in comedy, because I watch my own scenes with the crying and I just cringe at myself now. So it's just like, I don't want to cry in any more films, man.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm being facetious, of course.
But we're always our harshest critics. I mean, I'm an actor first and foremost, actually, and I don't like watching myself at all. Like if I'm watching myself on screen in the theater, I notice that I've got my hands clenched to the side, to the hand rests, and they'll just clench until I feel that my arms are sore, and I'm like, oh, oops. Because I'm doing my lines the way I wish I would have done them. I'm watching, and then I'm saying in my head, that's not what I meant.
I know a better way to do it now.
Right?
That's like I could nail that role now that I've seen my performance. Exactly.
Well, and the tricky thing is, because movies are shot so insequentially or unsequentially, non-sequentially. That's probably the word.
Non-sequentially. There you go.
Once I get above 3 syllables, I really struggle. So they're out of order. They're shot out of order. There we go. And so you don't even necessarily have the backstory in your brain. I mean, you're supposed to, but gosh, there are times when you're shooting a scene from the 3rd act that is really affected by something that happened in the 1st act, but you haven't shot that first scene, so you don't know. It's a challenge. That's the thing that people don't really understand about acting.
I have a newfound respect for acting. Now, I'd acted in a bunch of short films, but I was always just kind of playing a version of myself. for the most part. Now, Michael Monks, who played Pastor Skip, he's a good actor, but he's an acting coach in LA, and he gives acting lessons. And so he basically was my acting coach during the filming. It really just showed me that I had too low a view of acting because it's a much more demanding craft than I realized. Especially when you're doing a crying scene.
Well, because not only are you trying to get there emotionally, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, my next mark is 3 feet to the right. I've got to hit that while I'm being emotional, or I'm going to throw the focus off, and the camera guy is going to be mad at me. The lighting guy is going to be mad at me.
It's hard to do to make it look easy. And I'm not saying it's I don't want to sound like it's it's such a hard job type of thing, because Christopher and I have had this motto on set for years now, even during our shorts, because, when you're dealing with a bunch of creatives, everyone has a vision of what they think it should be. And their vision is, everyone thinks their vision is the best vision. That's human nature. So it can get tense sometimes on set. So Christopher and I have a rule now where when it's getting tense on set, really, one of us will yell out, "Fun!" Because we're making a film. I mean, this is fun. And we did the same thing during the filming of Church People. That was our motto. And, we had a great time filming that movie. And I think it translates into the actual product, because the relationships were great. There wasn't tension during the shooting itself for the most part. Not that there wasn't any hiccups, but for the most part, it was a really smooth, fun. The atmosphere was good on the set all the time. It was because you're doing what most people dream of doing. You're making a film. This is like a lot of people's dream, and you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And you're doing it for the kind of budget you never thought. When I wrote the script, I was thinking $200,000 budget would be like gigantic, and we were just under $2 million. This is amazing. You're living the dream, as they say. So, man, you should have fun with that, and not have a surly, sourpuss attitude. So we've always had that motto, which really does all of a sudden it changes the atmosphere, reminds everybody we're making a film, everyone. This is fun.
Right. So, and there are a lot of people that would love to be in your shoes. And that's what I have to remind myself too. Yeah. I mean, after a 12-hour day out in the cold or something, I'm still, for all intents and purposes, I'm living my dream. I mean, God has blessed me with a particular dream, and I held on to that dream long enough. And now it's I'm doing what I think he called me to do. Yeah. And just, do I love every minute of it? Of course not. Would I trade it for anything? No.
Well, it's not to say it's not hard work.
It is a lot of hard work.
You can have 12-hour days. That sometimes the conditions, the weather can really make it trying. It's not to say it's not hard, but when you're doing what you love, it's hard fun.
Yeah.
And that attitude really does affect the shoot itself, whether you're shooting a drama or a comedy or whatever. So I think that can really make a difference on the set and keeping those relationships. As I think in Christian films, though, I think that's the thing that Christian films bring. Not everyone now. We had all the main, the director, the writers, the producers, all the main folks that had creative control were all Christians. But a lot of our actors weren't, a lot of the crew wasn't. So we had a mixed crew and mixed cast. But I feel like the whole element of salt and light, really did affect the atmosphere of the set and the shooting and everything else. That's a witness itself, I think, in the production of a film. So,
and that's the same with The Chosen too. I mean, we're a mixture of believers and non-believers, and I've said all along, what a witness to just not be out there and shooting the gospel down people's throats, but to be out there just living as Christ wants you to live, being nice, saying please and thank you and acknowledging people and making eye contact and communicating and all that stuff. I think that's the way I like to live out the gospel.
Yeah, and I wasn't on set going, hey, who can I share the gospel with? I wasn't doing that. But all of a sudden, here we are. We're shooting one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's with William Baldwin and China Phillips, who are playing Blaze's parents, and we're shooting in a home. It's one of the few days where we're off, because we shot almost everything at Calvary Community Church, I think it was called. And there was such a gigantic facility that it could look like, a restaurant, a sanctuary, wherever. And but we were in an actual home, shooting this scene. And so I forget, but there was a break for a while. And so there was about 15, 20 of us just sitting there. And I don't even know how the discussion came up, to be honest. I cannot remember the discussion, but we were talking about, misconceptions about Christianity and how a lot of people think Christianity is about, being good, that it's based upon you being a good moral person. And somebody says it's not. Well, what is it then? And all of a sudden and literally 15 minutes, really sharing the gospel, but it was through natural conversation. It was like, I wasn't forcing it in because I'm not gifted at evangelism. I like sharing the gospel, but I do not have the gift of evangelism. So I'm not good at asking those questions that lead to the gospel conversation a lot of times. And they don't feel natural to me either, but it was just there. And the majority of people, it's like, I would say 80% of those 15, 20 people were all non-Christians. So it was just one of those, moments on the set where you're just going, well, that was fun. That was a fun day. Right.
And then you just leave it at that. You're like, you know what? If they all convert to Christianity, hey, I did my job. That's not the point. It's just you're planting seeds and you're being who you are naturally and not, being. It
wasn't forced in. I think that, and I go, that is always my message to Christian filmmakers is don't force your message in. Don't shoehorn it in because it will feel that way.
Yeah.
It's like if you're writing, find the story you love, work on that story, whatever the story. Now, sometimes that, if you're dealing with a Christian subculture or Christian theme, the theme will be right there. But if you're dealing with just a generic story, you're writing it from a Christian worldview, and eventually Christian themes will emerge, and then you can strengthen those. But find the story you're passionate about, the story you want to tell, because that's the common grace that God's given every human being. Is like we're interested in a good story.
Mm-hmm. You accomplished it in Church People for sure.
Well, thank you, man.
It's not preachy. It's set in a church, but it still doesn't feel like a movie that's shoving anything down my throat. It makes me laugh. It literally made me cry. And how do people see it now? I mean, what's the plan moving forward for Church People?
Yeah. So we were in theaters for 3 days. We made the top 10 in the box office. So that was fun news. So I always throw that in because that's even during COVID. So that was a big deal, but it didn't feel like a big deal because with COVID and I couldn't even see it here in California. The theaters were closed, but now it is, I think for the next month, it is showing online. So they can go to churchpeoplefilm.com. And I think they have certain times you can watch it. So it's almost like going to a theater, except it's a digital view.
Yeah.
But the other option is to go to Salem Now, which is the Salem network. So Salem Now, and you can either rent it or you can buy it on Salem Now. And that's like if you have smart TV, you can download the Salem Now app. You have to go on your website and to your free account for Salem Now that you have to create if you don't have one already. And then again, you can, if you buy it or rent it and you go back to your TV, it'll show up in the app right there and you can watch it on your television at home. So I think both those options now are for the next month. And then I think they'll roll out whatever the next, platforms are going to be for seeing it. But,
and I'll say this too, to people watching this, don't delay. If you want to see more content like this, the only way to show Hollywood or to show, filmmaking in general, that movies like this can succeed is to support them in their box office presence or in their, video on demand presence. I mean, we have to get out there and be supporting films like this.
Yeah, the bottom line is that if you want to see more movies like this, support it, because that even in the Christian market, it is show business, even in the Christian market, because your film has to be successful before somebody else will give you money to make another film. Like, well, you got to track. And then if you make another good one, then now you've got a track record. Like, look at the Kendrick brothers. Right. It's like now they have a track record that people trust. People know what they're going to get when they go to a Kendrick brother film. They know what to expect. And I think Christian film is a genre. So in a genre, you have to hit certain points. It's just like, try to do it in the most creative way you can, but you've got to have some sort of spiritual content. That's Christian. It's just built into the genre. There's an expectation between the audience and the filmmaker that you have to deliver. Otherwise, they're going to watch it and go, there was something off about it. I don't know what it was. But if people support it, other people will make more. That's the whole thing. And I'm really happy right now is like, if you like the film, tell somebody. And it seems to be right now that the word of mouth, again, which is the old fashioned, God ordained way of advertising his son, is just like, tell somebody, so it's a type of, it's a very biblical concept, but word of mouth really gets it done. If you like the film and you got to watch this, and you tell somebody else and they'll watch it off your recommendation. And that just keeps happening. And that right now, that seems to be the case. I'm really happy that people are responding very well to the film.
Well, I think that's the way 90% of movies get watched too, is somebody tells somebody about it. I mean, before I buy anything on Amazon, the first thing I do is I go and read the reviews. I see what other people thought.
Right.
I'm not going to spend 90 minutes or 120 minutes to watch a movie unless I know other people have enjoyed that movie. And other people, myself included, have enjoyed Church People very much. And it was a few years ago, Mom's Night Out came out. And to me, Mom's Night Out was one of the best Christian comedies. And I think Church People is right up there with it. I love Mom's Night Out because it dared to be funny, and it dared to poke fun at ourselves a little bit. Church People does the same thing. It dares to poke a little fun at us without being condescending, like you had said, or condescending wasn't the word. It was the
mean.
Mean, yeah. See, I tried to put too many syllables on there. The word is mean. But I think it works well, and it's a family. I mean, I brought my family, my 9-year-old. So here's my 9-year-old. He's brutally honest. Just makes no excuses about it. And he walked up to me like, we're still watching the credits. I didn't know that there was the behind the scenes thing after the credits, but that was awesome. I love that. And my son, my 9-year-old, walks by me and he goes, well, I didn't think it was going to be very good, but it actually was. Oh, there you go.
You can't get a better recommendation than that from a 9-year-old.
You really
didn't think it was going to be good, but yeah, that's exactly.
I don't know what that says about me and the movies that I make him watch, but he was very impressed. He actually enjoyed it. 9-year-old and my 11-year-old son, and actually my son is 8. He turns 9 in a few weeks. I'm already making him older than he should be. He's my baby. But all right, I'm going to let you go, man. This was really a lot of fun. And like I said, I've known you vicariously through Christopher. So it's great just connecting with you face to face like this. And I'm excited to see what you have up your sleeve next. And hopefully, at some point where maybe we've been working together, I think it would be a lot of fun.
That'd be great, man. I'd love it.
Really like the energy that you bring. And I thought your performance was outstanding in Church People.
Well, thanks, man.
Really, the writing was...
We'll keep that between us, because...
No. Come on, man. You rocked it. Man. You rocked it. Appreciate you. Guys, check out Church People. We've got lower thirds and stuff we'll put up on the bottom of the screen, and support Thor, support the whole team that put that movie together, because it is a real team effort. And,
movie making is a community endeavor. It's very faith-based in that sense. It's like church. You're doing it as a group. Yep. It's not one person's vision. Generally, you bring it all together, and there's so many people that contributed and brought. It's almost amazing that a good film gets made because you have so many competing visions. But by God's grace, you bring it all together, and the result can be pleasant sometimes. Which in this case, I hope it is.
I think there's an old adage that no film wants to get made.
Oh wow! Yeah,
there are just so many obstacles, too many things that could come up and thwart it. But God bless you guys with Church People. And
thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed it.
More. Yeah, appreciate it, brother. All right.
See you down the road.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, it's Noah Bennett, founder of Against the Tide Media. Got a quick favor to ask that is as fast as the click of a button. If you're a fan of The Chosen and ATTM special content on this channel, you can easily show your support by liking this video, clicking subscribe, and the notification bell. You'll be one of the first to know when new videos are released. This will help us continue to grow and spread our message to the world through interviews and other special features such as Zoom rooms, chatting with the Chosen, 53 questions with Raina, and talking back with Tara and Barb. Actually, only 12% of our viewers are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Only 12%, meaning that almost 90% are not, and I'd love for you to join us in helping the Chosen, along with other Christian entertainment, to reach as many people as possible, and it really helps so much. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support, and remember, like, subscribe, notification bell. Thank you again.
Hey, Thor, how are you?
Hello, sir. Good, man.
Good, good. Thanks for making the time for this.
No problem.
I admit Christopher was supposed to be my guinea pig because I'm usually on the other side and don't normally host. So I will do my best to seem professional here.
Is this a new thing?
Yeah. It's so the company Against the Tide Media was started by a 13-year-old kid, Noah Bennett, and he's awesome. He loves the Chosen and he loves faith-based content, and so
oh wow,
I'm one of the people that for some reason he trusts to do stuff like this with. So
okay, that's funny.
Yeah,
13-year-old. Wow.
Yeah, no, he's been fantastic. He and his team will edit this together. I mean, he has adults certainly helping out, but
still,
yeah, it's been really cool. So
amazing.
So let me just I'm going to adjust the view here.
All right.
So that's gallery. All right. You have any questions before we officially start?
Not really. No, I'm good to wing it.
All right. Yeah, good. That's the way I like it, man. It comes across more authentic that way anyway. All right, so I'll introduce just on me, and then I'm going to open it up, and it'll be, your view will never change throughout this, so you don't have to worry about any of that. All right, so we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That character is really ended up being a pivotal character it's not just a bit part, it's pivotal. It's really a pivotal, that's what I'm trying to say, character in the film. But now one of the things, like you work in films and everything, but I realized that just then that so many pastors, however well-intentioned they were in America, had done such crazy things to attract people to church. All right, I lost you for a second. Are we good?
Yep, I lost you there too. So yeah, pick up. Okay. Pastors were doing such crazy things, and even some of the what are the tropes of. I'm
not going to give it the line, but Matthew has a line in that segment that to me is. Sorry, man. I must have. I moved outside because my son's napping and my daughter's using the garage where my office is right now.
No, and I'm watching.
Some questions weaker.
I'm watching your bars go from like yellow
Matthew right there has two, different 2-minute pitch. Donald Faison used to be in Scrubs, for its entire run, and Joey Fatone used to be in NSYNC. But people go, all
That
right,
was good.
sorry.
No, it was good timing because right above me, my kids just all of a sudden started to do WWE. So we cut out right as that happened. You had just left off. I lost you right at and Joey Fatone from NSYNC.
And because it's an important theme in the Christian subculture. As a church planter, there, because he's napping right now. That's okay. That's why I'm out here. So thank you guys so much. God bless. You too. We just had a delivery there.
Yeah.
So the point is this: as a church planter, I'm getting emails all the time from influencers. Influencers, is that the word you use now? People that are influencers.
Yep. Influencers. Yes, influencers.
Yes, influencers. So I get emails from them because I'm dealing with two things in my own personal life because I'm still a church planter. But I always hear things like how, you know what? I'm going to try to go inside so this stops happening.
Okay.
Let me,
and it's cool. It'll be edited together so that we can, get rid of a lot of these
right
cutouts.
But just to keep the flow of thought going.
Sure. Yeah.
Here. I just saw my daughter leave, so I think she's out of the garage. Yes. Okay.
So I'll give us a little segue here and just introduce the new scenery.
There you go. That's good. All right. There's actually a documentary on him called what's it called? Anyway, search Martin Lloyd-Jones documentary. Logic on Fire. That's the name of the documentary. Logic on Fire. So it is. It's a much more. It's much harder to. It's if you do. It's hard to do to make it look easy. That's the whole thing. It's like it is a more. Anyway, so and I'm not saying it's a. I don't want to sound like it's a. It's such a hard job type of thing. Churches are fit. The big gigantic churches are not the norm, and I'm not against big churches.